All right, I'm going to hit the button. Everyone, welcome. We'll take a few moments to allow people to trickle in, arrive to this space. Hopefully you're all doing well and having a great day. Yes, thank you. If you feel up for it, feel free to say hi in the chat and tell us where you're zooming in from. Bonus if it's from outer space. Wow, Massachusetts, South Dakota, Virginia, New Jersey, Florida, Ohio, Texas, NYC. So fun. Wisconsin. Oh my goodness, all over. Costa Rica, did I see that right? Why are you not on the beach? No, thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here. North Carolina, Arkansas. Amazing. California, Illinois, Brazil. Wow, welcome. It's fantastic. Maine, British Columbia, Georgia. Yes, and as we're chatting each other up, Shantae on our team is adding some files for the CEUs, New Mexico. So please feel free to check those files out. And of course, we will send them after as well. We will make sure you get them. Houston, Texas, Miami, Florida. Fantastic. We'll take a few more moments, allow folks to join us. Wow, 200. This is wonderful. California, North Carolina, all over. Food safety, it just, it has no barriers, it has no boundaries. It's fantastic to see such great representation. Oklahoma. Wonderful. Jealous of all the people in the warm weather. Yeah. I was trying not to say something. Kansas. Wow. So we'll wait about, I don't know, about 30 more seconds here. Oh, Mary, thanks for asking. We're based in the DC area, but oh, Massachusetts. Awesome. Carrie will like that. My brother lives there. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Brittany Saunier. I am the Executive Director of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. And here we are on today's webinar, Nutrition and Food Safety. Not that big of a leap. We just thought we would play a little bit with Leap Day because it really isn't that big of a leap. So we're excited to have you here. Next slide, please. Oh, and here I am. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. We're always happy to hear from you and learn more about your work in food safety educations. Thank you. Next slide. So a little bit about how today will occur. So you'll hear welcome from me and some of the logistics aspects. Then we'll hear from Carrie Taylor with Big Y Foods, Raeanne Sarazen with Culinary Nutrition Consulting, Elisabetta with Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. We'll also then, after their presentations, we'll have a roundtable discussion bringing these thought leaders together to answer some big questions that we have. And then we'll allow time for Q&A from you all. So a little bit about that, please use the Q&A box there at the bottom. We will do our best to monitor the chat, but we may not be able to get to your message or see it. So the Q&A helps us filter things appropriately. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Yes, so sending the questions. After the webinar, we will be sending out a brief survey. If you're able to complete that, it would help us continue to provide quality programming for you and also identify any needs or topics that might be helpful for your future education efforts. Next slide, please. And here are the CEUs or professional development opportunities that we will be offering after today's event. There, as I mentioned in the chat box, Shantae is leaving all sorts of documents for you to capture. We'll also provide it in a follow-up email. We ask that you give us at least 24 hours to get that out. It just takes a little bit of time sometimes to collate all the content. They'll also be available at fightback.org under the free resource tab and recorded webinars. I also encourage you to go there to check out past webinars we've done. And those of you who are seeking NCHEC CEUs, there is an online questionnaire that needs to be completed by the end of April to receive them. And that will go out in all the follow-up information as well. Next slide. So a little bit about the Partnership for Food Safety Education. We are a partnership. So we are a collective of unique sectors. We serve about 13,000 health and food safety educators. You all represent that group pretty well, representing nutrition, representing extension, food banks, nonprofits, regulatory, you name it. We also collaborate with 40 partner organizations and federal liaisons, the CDC, FDA, and USDA. And we do this collectively to make sure people stay safe from foodborne illness and that they are able to be empowered and equipped when handling food at home, because unfortunately about 48 million people are estimated to become ill from foodborne illness. A significant number of hospitalizations, and sadly, some people may die as a result of that. So it's really important to follow the safe food handling steps, and that is why we exist to provide that type of information for you. Next slide. So we have a fun poll question just to get, our brains working. And this is a toughie. I don't really know what I would choose. To me, it's very specific to the type of cheese and the type of chocolate. But this is a hard question for sure. So go ahead. The poll is open. Go ahead and please just tell us, for fun, what your choice would be. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the neither. I'm a little concerned about that 1% though. I'm just kidding. All of our preferences are important. So let's see here. Take a few more moments. All right. We'll go ahead and see the results here. I'm surprised. I mean, it's fairly equal between chocolate and cheese, but neither. Please don't make me. Oh, I understand. I am with you. All right. Thank you, guys. That was fun. That was totally fun. So coming up, I'm so pleased to share our first speaker of the day. We have Carrie Taylor. She is with Big Y Foods as the lead registered dietitian nutritionist for Big Y Foods. Carrie has had the awesome opportunity to watch the footprint Big Y's nutrition program grow since launching the Living Well, Eating Smart program in 2005. During her tenure, Carrie has received recognition for her impact for local and state dietetic associations, the American Heart Association, Griffin Report, and Progressive Grocer. Trained in dietetics and sports medicine from Virginia Tech, as well as yoga, meditation, and forest bathing from Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, Carrie promotes an embodied approach to wellness. Through her writing and media for the Be Well with Big Y program, Carrie aims to inspire others to live the life they deserve through food, physical activity, and mindfulness while connecting to nature. Making Western Massachusetts her home since joining Big Y, Carrie relishes in the offerings of the more than human world of the region and hikes almost daily with her pups and son in tow. Welcome, Carrie. It's such a joy to have you, and take us away.
All right. Thank you so much, Brittany. The one thing I do want to say, you can move forward on the slide, is that I have been a retail dietitian for almost 19 years, but before that time, I was a cooperative extension agent. And at Virginia Tech, cooperative extension was very much part of our curriculum. So food safety has been part of our dietitian program at our retailer from the very beginning. So you can move forward. So why retail dietitians? And even when we have networking conferences within the supermarket world, sometimes we'll have this conversation with our fellow colleagues. And, you know, as registered dietitians, we have unique qualifications. We have that food science background. And as I've learned, depending on your program that you went through for your education, food safety may have been an integral part, like it was at Virginia Tech. You can move forward. So we have found with our dietitian team here that our customers have a lot to learn still when it comes to food safety, whether it's rinsing chicken, still thawing meat on countertops. My mom's generation, for some reason, they just won't stop. And also just looking at meat and kind of gauging if it's done or how it feels. And you know, going through COVID, you would hope a lot of us would know how to wash our hands correctly, but that still remains an educational moment. And then whether you're storing meat above the crisper in the refrigerator, or even when you're grocery shopping and where you're placing raw meat within the carriage, we have a lot of talking points still with our customers. You can move forward. So at Big Y, when we launched Living Well, Eating Smart, we were really anchored in a newsletter that I wrote in-house, and food safety was part of the themes from the very beginning. And so we used to have a kids page, and a lot of times that's where we would do our food safety education to really get children involved. Because of my background in cooperative extension, that was the population I focused on. And so whether it was me by myself or the team as it's grown throughout the years, food safety is a pillar of our education, and it always has been. So even though we weren't official partners with the partnership, we were in liaison relationship with the partnership for years, working with Shelley and her team at that time to get resources and to educate our consumers. So we do a lot of education in print. What my primary role is here at Big Y is really nutrition communications and education. So coming from extension, writing curriculum and doing community education, it's a perfect fit. Now we just hit a lot more people than I may have. So again, talking about food safety from the dietitian corner, which is more written for adults, as well as in our magazine. That's what the second example is, which wasn't the nutrition publication. It was just the general magazine for our customers, where we would feature articles and recipes. And we wanted to make sure we talked about our official partnership with the food safety, the Partnership for Food Safety Education. So there are a lot of opportunities in this position to get our word out. That is one primary reason why I switched from extension to retail, because I knew I could do the same education, but the vastness of my audience would grow. So even though we do have print publications, and we have in the past, we're very much more anchored online these days. So throughout the year, we will talk about food safety. This is an example when we're talking about Thanksgiving leftovers, or even if we're talking about hurricane preparedness because of being on the New England side of the country. But when we're just talking about during a power outage for a blizzard, we'll still integrate food safety. And then we do a lot of on-screen media as well. So whether it's me and my counterpart, Andrea Luttrell, we'll do videos that will run in store as well as on social media and online on YouTube. And we will do food safety throughout the year. And we've also done food safety education when it's not necessarily us, but it's our education, and it's more of a animated graphic for customers to watch. Now, being in the communications part of our company, working within the marketing department, I also am in charge of writing our education for social media when it comes to wellness. So we will integrate food safety, even if it's seasonal, like coming up for Easter for egg safety, into posts that we will do for our customers there, as well as a company highlighting our internal food safety team and bringing awareness to customers that they exist, what their role is, and what their background is. At Big Y, when we became official partners with the partnership, we started integrating the Safe Recipe Style Guide. And we may have been one of the first retailers to do that across the entire recipe spectrum here. It just became a requirement. So standardizing recipes is a project that's underway to make sure that the Safe Recipe Style Guide food safety prompts are followed whenever you go and grab a recipe on bigY.com. It's a very large project. It's still underway, but these are just two examples of our dietitian team's recipes, where if you went online, you could see the prompts of washing hands and so on and so forth, and you'll learn more in a little bit. So when we do collaborate with brands, we continue the food safety education conversation with them. And in this case, Chabasso Bakery is a local bakery in New Haven, Connecticut, and they came to our team to start highlighting different recipes. And part of that initial conversation was explaining, this is great, but we need you to understand there is a protocol of how we standardize our recipes, and we will integrate food safety education for what you present to us. And all of our collaborators have been on board, and it's actually been a really good teaching moment with those companies as well. So our dietitian team has grown pretty substantially and in depth of expertise. So we built this team with the intention to be in the best position to assist all of our consumers across different ages, across different backgrounds, to really address their interests, their needs, while also including food safety in that education. So if we're talking about food safety specifically, that is one thing, but we still integrate food safety education if we're talking about meal planning, if we're talking about doing a store tour, whether we're leading that in store or we're doing it virtually. Food safety education is part of that conversation. And having this program built from an extension agent who also went to a very focused food safety education undergraduate program is really why our team runs the way it does, by joining nutrition and food safety together. So that is it for what we're doing at Big Y.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Big Y, also for being a formal partner of the partnership. And one of the reasons why I invited Carrie, or we invited Carrie to be part of this webinar, was to share that retailer perspective in case you're working in that type of environment, how nutrition and food safety can go together. So up next, we have Raeanne Sarazen. Raeanne is a registered dietitian and chef, combined over 20 years of experience producing recipe content as a test kitchen professional, food writer, and editor. Her writing and recipes have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, the Wall Street Journal, Cooking Light, Better Homes and Gardens, and among other places. She is the author of the new book, The Complete Recipe Writing Guide, a comprehensive resource for anyone with a desire to develop, write, and share well-crafted recipes. Welcome, Raeanne.
Thanks, Brittany. I'm happy to be here today. So what I'm going to be talking about is incorporating food safety into recipes and bring it from my perspective, which is sharing a bit about my experience in working in a hospital as a clinical dietitian, in food publishing as the test kitchen director at the Chicago Tribune and assistant food editor, or I should say former. I've worked in restaurant kitchens where food safety was a lot of the focus. And also today as a culinary nutrition consultant where I'm still working with recipe content in the capacity with either nonprofits, food companies, or publishers. So in terms of what we're going to try to cover very quickly today over this time is I'm going to talk about incorporating food safety into recipes, but I'd like to start with some of the challenges that we face in doing so. Quickly then talk about the target audience, the importance of it, give some suggestions on how to incorporate food safety messages into your recipes, and end with resources. So just for context, in terms of one big challenge that we all have is that there is just so much content out there, and there is just so many content creators. So in this sense, there is just a lot of information coming out, and this information oftentimes is not always accurate, and sometimes the recipes don't work. A lot of times the recipes don't have food safety information in it. And really what that leaves is a consumer that is sometimes misinformed, confused, and just sort of frustrated when the recipes don't work. And I just did want to share really quickly for those that are really curious, like how did all this explosion of recipe content come to be? Back in 1990, back when I even started developing recipes, there was pretty much recipes that appeared in newspapers, magazines, and cookbooks. And they were done by food professionals, home economists, food writers, people with a culinary background. And then come 1997, when the blogging started, there was just like this explosion of recipe content and nutrition information that was just by anybody. It was sort of the democratization. Anyone could write content at that point. And then if you fast forward to today, 2024, there are more people than ever producing content on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and oftentimes the leaders are the food influencers. Next slide. So, we have all this content, and then we have all these cookbooks as well. And some things that are a challenge could be the unlearning. And the unlearning means, if you look at this publication on the left, Better Homes and Garden from 1953, we have the instruction to wash the outside with cold water, wipe the inside with a damp cloth. Move forward to 2001, we have this fabulous cookbook which was written by Julia Child, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And she instructs in the very last sentence it's probably wise to give them a thorough washing and drying before storing or cooking, just to be on the safe side. So that is the instruction for how to handle chicken. And why that's relevant is that a lot of people still have those cookbooks. A lot of people were taught from those cookbooks, and they then are mirroring that sort of behavior for the people who are watching them handle things in the kitchen. And I guess we're going to move on to the next slide, which is a video, but I just wanted to introduce it, which is sometimes the challenge is still happening today. So there are these fabulous chefs like Jacques Pepin, I want you guys to watch the video and just sort of note a few things of mixed messages. The cooking is great, but watch what he does with the knife when it comes to touching the butter, the cutting board, the transition in the video that doesn't show it being cleaned, and then also him touching the paprika jar after touching raw chicken. So just watch as an example.
Hi, I'm Jacques Pepin, and I'm cooking at home. This is another very easy recipe done with a chicken breast. This is just sauté this way. Okay, here I'm going to put a good tablespoon and a half of butter and flour. So I want to put, to coat it with the flour. Now let's see my garlic. I have a fair amount of garlic here. 2 or 3. I mean, this is a larger one. Those are smaller ones. So about 10 ounces and 12 ounces. I'm cutting a little bit along the bone on each side. That helps the cooking, And then on top of this, I'll put like about a quarter teaspoon or so of salt, a bit of Spanish paprika here,
Anyway, so as you can see, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to incorporating food safety into recipes, but I strongly believe that recipes really are an educational tool to teach people how to cook and eat healthier and safer. So we could just, next slide. And I think it is really important. Again, some of the challenges here is the length of the copy. I think we had the two slides mixed up. Sorry about that. The challenge here is just that in addition to sort of the mixed messages in the media, even today when we watch a really well-respected chef like Jacques Pepin cook, there's also challenges actually in the actual digital or print copy. Sometimes the length is just too long. And so today people have a really short attention span. They can feel very overwhelmed with content. It's just too much to read. And adding food safety information can kind of also add to that difficulty. It just adds more words to the page. Sometimes there's legitimate space constraints with incorporating food safety messages into recipes. There's just no room on the back of a package, or there may not be on a digital page either. And then I find that one of the challenges too is that the kitchen thermometer, that people don't own one, or they just don't know how to use it properly. So even though what I was saying on the previous slide, that I do think recipes really are the educational tool to reach people. And it's really important to include this information in the recipes for the consumer. And I would say the very first thing that you should do when you want to incorporate food safety messages into recipes is start at the beginning and understand your target audience, just like with any kind of reading. So you have to ask yourself, what are the cooking skills of the audience I'm writing for? Do they have limited cooking knowledge, or do they have a higher cooking knowledge? You have to ask, how old they are, or maybe their cultural background, or what their needs are. So you really want that recipe to meet their needs, and that's who you're writing the target audience for, in the target audience. So let's take a look at a recipe that would be appropriate for an audience with limited cooking knowledge. So there's just a few things to point out. So in terms of the length of the recipe, the ingredients are only 5 or 6 ingredients, which is not too overwhelming. The directions are also short. There's only 5 steps in the direction. The directions are also given in a very short and succinct way, of which the recipe writer would say to themselves, what are the important things that I want to include in my recipe directions to ensure that people are food safe and there is avoiding any kind of danger. The first one would be food safety, would be wash your hands. It could be with soap and water, but that's assumed to keep it short. Then something as simple as marinate in the refrigerator. You tell them right to the point. In terms of step 4, to throw out that leftover marinade. And then step 5, you're asking them to cook the pork to a certain temperature, but also time. A pretty simple recipe. The next one, while it also incorporates food safety instruction, I just want to point out a few things that can be really difficult. One, there's just a lot of copy. And again, a lot of clutter. And with that, a lot of recipe ingredients. So the other one had 6 ingredients, which is already a lot. This one has 14 ingredients. And in them, each has its own instruction on how to clean something. So while very helpful, it sort of clutters the content and makes it look a little bit overwhelming, and people can just sort of gloss over and not even choose to follow the recipe. Next slide. Another great in this type of audience is to write your recipe, but have it be led by the visual, because everybody loves visuals today, and it's often something that people will turn to before they're even going to read the recipe. So you can have something simple and educational, like you're showing what it looks like to cut chicken into thin strips. You're then saying in step 2, the importance of hand washing and washing your cutting board and the knife, and then actually showing them that this is what you have to do before you chop the onions. The next slide, which we can just wait for a second, is something that I did during COVID, where I was teaching a life skill class to young kids at the Boys and Girls Club. And when I would go through jotting down, it was very casual, my video scripting notes, I always made sure I incorporated one type of food safety message. And in this case, I always start washing my hands, but this is just to show you how you should write something into your script.
Take some soap,
some warm water, and I'm going to scrub the top of my hands, in between my hands, my fingernails, and everything for about 20 seconds. So basically that's just showing something. And I, sometimes during the video, I did something where I actually showed them and told them why. So the importance is that when you create video content, to make sure you script in the food safety messages that you want throughout the video. So when you move to a different type of audience that, one with limited cooking skills versus writing a recipe for a higher level cooking knowledge, the key thing is I again think about my audience, but I think, what is it that I could get them to pay attention to? And in this case, it's a chicken recipe, and I'm going to focus on how they can learn how to create some perfectly grilled chicken. And they could do that by buying a thermometer. And I use that place in the notes section to tell them, you want good chicken, this is how you do it. You should definitely get a thermometer. Here are my favorites, the Thermopen and the Thermopop. I buy them for gifts for friends and family. And so I sort of take them in a backwards way, showing them how important it is to use a food thermometer and actually own one, even though that's not per se a really food safety sort of instruction. It's my way of getting to it. I also say in step 4, the importance of how you inserted it into the thickest part of the meat with a time and a temperature. And in step 1, I would put something maybe simple in parentheses, like no need to wash it first. So they're thinking, because I'm giving them the instruction, place the chicken into a bag, where I never talk about washing it or not, but I'm telling them, just don't. And then in another one, this is just sort of interesting for anybody who writes recipes, that when you think about writing food safety instructions in, you're also doing things that you're wanting them to be safe. So in this case, you want them to avoid a kitchen disaster. And a butternut squash soup that's going to be pureed. And once it's hot, if anyone's ever done this, where they've had puree spew out at the top of the blender, getting on them really hot liquid and all over the counter, as a recipe writer, you really would build a lot of trust by telling them the instructions on how to be safe, which is let the soup cool, fill the blender to 3/4 full, and make sure you put your hand over the top of the blender. So not quite a food safety in terms of foodborne illness, but as somebody who's teaching, even safe practices in the kitchen is helpful as well. So some of my suggestions for incorporating food safety in recipes is to reduce the clutter. Think about using the food safe note at the bottom of a recipe, so you're not incorporating it always within the recipe content or the recipe ingredient or the directions. And if you were writing a cookbook, to think about including the food safety information in the front of the cookbook, and when important, just give an asterisk or referral back to that page for the person who owns it. For things with space constraints, that's difficult because there is such a need to actually keep to a word count on a page or a digital page so it's not cluttered, but you can learn how to write recipes that are a lot more clear and concise. There is a skill to that. Also, linking to food safety instructions or a video within the recipe online reduces the clutter, but also goes back to teach them. As I mentioned earlier, doing a cooking video where you're placing the basic food safety instructions in a actually video script. If you're teaching a food, like a cooking class in person or online, to give a separate and easy to read food safety sheet. Again, that could simplify the recipe, but you're still sort of using it in tandem. And for those of you who are either creating content or work with people who create content, it's just important to figure out how we can go about educating those who are creating it to create better recipes and to include food safety in their recipes. Next slide. Okay. So in terms of resources, the Safe Recipe Style Guide by the Partnership for Food Safety and Education is a great resource. It gives you prompts that you can include within the recipe itself, the ingredients or the directions. And it's just a great reference that you can use to get an idea of what type of language to use. In terms of their other one, which is the Safe Recipe Style Guide for Video Creators, which I was a reviewer on, is a great also resource for people who are creating video content, as that's so very popular today. And then finally, there is my book that was just released. It was published by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And I would say it is a very comprehensive resource book, over 400 pages. It touches on recipe development, where it's dedicated the first 6 chapters for translating dietary related conditions into recipes. So it touches on recipe development for health and wellness, food allergies, celiac disease, and more. And it also touches on a very solid chapter on recipe writing, recipe testing, nutrition analysis, and also food styling and video, which is the most important part of recipes, it seems to be today. But throughout the book, because of my interest in this, I really felt that the food safety element, both within the writing and the recipe development, and even having the Partnership for Food Safety's Safe Food Style Guide as an appendix, it is a book that also focuses on how to incorporate food safety into recipes, because it is such a very useful and important topic for people who are creating content to know about. And here's my contact information if anybody has any questions or anything that I could answer also in the future.
Thank you. And thank you, Raeanne. What I love about recipes is that if you are providing any nutrition counseling or working with dietary restraints, recipes are a great way to incorporate safe food handling information. So thank you so much for the work that you've done there. Up next, we have Dr. Lambertini. Dr. Lambertini is a research lead, team lead at GAIN with 15 years of applied experimental and analytics experience in food and water safety, health risk modeling, and quantitative decision analysis in food and health systems. Based in Washington, D.C., they oversee the research activities of the GAIN Eat Safe program and provide expertise in food safety and quantitative methods with focus on informal supply chains of nutritious foods in LMICs. Building upon their background in public health engineering before joining GAIN, they served as principal investigator at the Research Triangle Institute as a member of the research faculty in the Department of Nutrition and Food and Science at the University of Maryland, and as a researcher in the Department of Food Science and Technology at the University of California at Davis. Thank you so much, and take us away.
Thank you, and wonderful to be here. Don't worry, this is not a heavy research talk. It's flying through a couple of ways that we can look at food safety and nutrition together. Next slide, please. And before doing that, I will quickly introduce you to GAIN for those of you that may not know it. Next slide. And GAIN is a nonprofit foundation that was started about 20 years ago, and it works to transform food systems so that they can deliver more safe and nutritional food for all people, with a focus on the most vulnerable. Next, we work in various parts of the world, a lot in Africa and Southeast Asia, with representative office in Europe and the US. And GAIN is an organization that really took it to heart to see how we can harmonize nutrition and food safety on various aspects, programming, policy, and how we measure impact, right? So as part of this effort, we did some review of the knowledge around the intersection of nutrition and food safety. Next. And I'm giving you some numbers worldwide, and I will talk about international processes, but a lot of the same processes play out in the US, so you will see that they are very relatable. We now are starting to see the numbers, the burden of foodborne disease globally, and it's a lot, is in the same order of each of HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, and we are refining that knowledge on the burden. You can see that 40% of the burden is borne by children, and the economic costs are also staggering. It's preventable, and it's a waste of life and resources. Next. If you look at the number across regions, you also see that 70% of the deaths happen in low and middle income country. That's what the LMIC stands for. Even though the population there is only 41%, so very much disproportionate. Now, with that in mind, and next slide, we know that the same groups and the same region also suffer from a disproportionate amount of the malnutrition burden. And by that, we mean that there is not enough food, or sometimes too much food, or the wrong kind of food. Those are the situations that can lead to malnutrition imbalances. Next slide. And when we talk about food safety and nutrition together, what we know is health, obviously, but not, depends on both improved nutrition and a reduction in foodborne illness. At the same time, worldwide, but also in the US, the most nutritional foods often carry the highest risk. We're talking about fresh fruit and vegetable, we're talking about meat and dairy, animal products. At the same time, the people that are at great risk of malnutrition are usually vulnerable groups that are also at the great risk of foodborne illness for reasons of access to food or for the quality of food that they can procure. Now, we are starting to see that food safety and nutrition are closely linked, and understanding those mechanisms can help devise solutions. Because intervening on one often has a positive effect on the other, and vice versa. So next slide. In the next couple of slides, I will just mention, we don't have time for in-depth discussion here, but mention some categories that we looked at where we're starting to have some good evidence, in some more than others. But that's where we can intervene. So in terms of health and physiology, the first one example, next slide, please. One example is stunting, which is low height for age, right, in children. It's a deficiency in growth and development of the human body as children, and is associated with other issues such as lower cognitive abilities and chronic disease and obesity. So historically, it was thought as just due to undernutrition, but we now have much more evidence of complex networks of determinants. Next slide. In particular, we now have evidence that diarrhea is a factor that is strongly associated with stunting in children. The evidence is not as good for adults, but this association is now established for children. We don't know which agents, disease agents, are the culprits for this. Possibly it's some, but it's possible that is the infectious process in itself. Now, stunting is also associated with other foodborne exposure that is not directly diarrheal, for example, mycotoxins. So stunting is a high burden worldwide and is a fairly direct link to foodborne illness and foodborne exposure that we now can put our finger on. And that is also one good node to intervene, right? We have a clear reason to. That's not the only link. When we think of health impacts and physiology, immune response also plays a big role. Of course, immune response is involved in protection from foodborne infections, or all infections, including foodborne. And states of malnutrition can impair immune response, right? While on the other side, good nutrition can make you more resistant to infection. Chronic diseases have been linked to both, right? There's a lot of chronic that can happen as a sequelae of foodborne infection, not just malnutrition, and cognitive development and reproductive health as well. I would mention that we have a report that I'm putting in the reference, so you can look at more details here, but there is still a mixed bag in terms of evidence. A lot is missing, but also a lot of new information that is pointing at the fact that they're not physiologically two separate mechanisms, but they very much interact with each other and have shared outcomes that they can contribute to, both in positive and negative. Next. Now, if we think of consumers, second category, that's also a very rich angle to look at this issue, and also a very powerful one. I will mention a couple of mechanisms that can happen. In some, we are starting to have evidence, in some not. So in this and the next categories, the evidence is less strong, but very much something that would be useful to have more information on. Now, we know that consumers have preferences and choose food, right? And if they have concerns over the safety of food, they may impact whether they buy it or not. They both in the positive or the negative. They can avoid a risky food, such as certain types of meat or meat handled in a certain way, and then they would forgo the nutrition, right, from that food. At the same time, they may go with a preference for a certain food in spite of the safety. Second, if safer food are more expensive, then the consumer is faced with the trade-off, right? Buying less of the more expensive and safer food, but then forego the possibility to buy other food and potentially other nutritional foods. So there may be a cross between choosing the safety and choosing the nutritious. Something that we see playing out everywhere, really, but a lot in developing country, is the time that consumers put into selecting and preparing food. Right? It's possible that with time to go to the right vendor, the right market at the right time, you can find higher quality and safer food, or you can work harder to make it safe at home. But that time may conflict then with other productive activities and could reduce income, for example, in the family. Now, on the other hand, if you go from nutrition impacts on the right to food safety on the left, we are starting to see that better nourished people have not only health impacts, but benefits, but also societal and socioeconomic benefits, such as the ability to not be sick, be in better health, and be more likely to be gainful, employed, and have higher education level, which in turn may increase their food budget and may also increase their ability to choose, right? To know what food is more nutrition or safer. Next. In terms of supply chain, that's a quick example, but you can see the demand and supply dynamics playing out upstreams in the supply chain. Here in the consumer and interaction with their retail environment. In Rwanda, we see an example where as part of a nutrition program, fortified food were made available, right? In this case, complementary porridges for young children, but people were not buying them. And looking at the motivation, we see that consumers were very divided on whether to buy a higher nutritional food versus what they were doing is due to concern over fraud, they were buying the ingredients and blending the complementary food at home, right? But also the ingredients that they could acquire to blend at home had the risk of adulteration. So there was a lot of perception that could be real or not, but also you can see the willingness of the consumers to bring matters in their own hand and choose differently in a way that was not intuitive, because the program thought that this higher value food from the point of view of nutrition would be a hit. Next, I'm going to fly through a couple of more examples in the supply and policy realm. And in the slides, I'm giving you a little more in the reference. So if you download the slides, you'll have a bit more of a comprehensive view of these categories. If you look at the supply chains, one example is when the consumer has a concern about food. They see illnesses and they are quick to blame vendors for it. And on the other hand, the vendors are powerless to counter the accusation, because they don't know if there is a connection to their produce, and they don't know what to do to make it better, or be sure that they're not doing something that puts their customers at risk. So, and it's an example that points at how the consumer demand can be powerful in moving things forward, right? The vendor now know that they may be held accountable, but at the same time, the vendors and supply chain upstream will need to know what they can do differently and communicate it to the consumer. One way that we're doing this in Nigeria as part of a game project, the Eat Safe project, is to create a brand, a vendor brand that you see in the picture, where the colors and some of the items that vendors have in their shop indicate that they have undergone training, and then they are doing something different and better to keep their food safe. So that consumer demand has a way to distinguish, and of course verified if they're actually doing it or not. But it helps them, we hope, choose, make it easier for them to choose the safer food. Next. In terms of policy, there's a lot of discussion on how policy can be coherent, right? Not contradict each other, and how they can leverage their impact. One example that of not doing so is a recent one from China that you probably have heard about, where in 2004, several babies died after drinking nutritionally inadequate formula. And as a result, the government set higher standards for the protein levels in formula, so a nutrition policy. However, later, some producers were adding melamine to the milk as an adulterant, which caused several deaths and also thousands of illnesses. And as you know, melamine is the nitrogen-rich chemical that in tests for milk quality shows up as protein. So it was very much an adulteration, an economic adulteration issues, but with very serious food safety implication. So in this case, a nutrition policy, by not accounting for the potential food safety issues, ended up being worse than not having the policy at all. Next. So just to conclude, and conclude is really the start of a longer discussion, which I hope we can have some ways that we can move this forward now that we are seeing more evidence. Is of course understanding better how these dynamics can play in various categories, and these four are just some of the broader categories that Gain looked at. But we can start focusing on highly nutritious foods, right? Considering the food safety risks. There is no point in making a non-nutrition food the safest in terms of health impacts. That would not go very far. We can understand consumer and supply chain motivations. And in policy, we can always think how one intervention can impact the other fields. So if it's a nutrition intervention, how we can impact food safety and vice versa. I know it was just a bird's eye view, but I hope it gives us some food for thoughts, both globally and domestically. So thank you.
Thank you. We're going, in the interest of time, we're going to skip the next poll question, go straight to our roundtable. One question, so we'll have all of our presenters here, but the question that I was thinking that we could start with, and especially since we only have a few moments and we want to get to the Q&A. So also I should share, if you have a question for the Q&A, please use the Q&A chat box, and then we'll get there shortly after this brief discussion. But the question I have for our panelists is, if there was only one thing that you'd hope that the audience takes away from today, what would it be? Just like the big picture, one thing they'd take away when it comes to incorporating food safety and nutrition together.
It doesn't matter who goes first.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That might help. Hey, Carrie, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
As I try to emphasize going through what we do at Big Y and how we utilize our platforms to do the education, the main takeaway is that, yes, food safety is always possible to be added in. And when we started off using the style guide to add prompts in our recipes, we were pretty wordy. And then we figured out throughout, months and months, like, okay, now we're going to water it down this way. Now we're going to add less messaging here, and really got succinct, but never stepping away from it. Even when we do our media and it's not a food safety topic, but we're showing preparation of food, we still weave it in there. So it's just part of the education, and it just works.
And I think to dovetail on that, I would add that recipes tell a story. And the story you tell in the recipe is something that is really important, both from a nutrition standpoint and from a food safety standpoint. And I think that learning how to write better recipes and learning how to think of them a little bit differently, which is, I think of recipes as something that is, whoever follows a recipe should be successful. You never want to confuse them, but you also want to sort of subtly be able to teach them something. And, people can argue along the way, for people who are food writers, especially, that, our recipes really meant to be anything more than inspiration for people. And I would say, yes, they are for inspiration, but they're also to teach how to cook and eat healthier and safer. And it's just one vehicle and way that we can reach an audience in terms of like who's learning how to cook, because the old way that people would stand in the kitchen cooking with their mother, father, grandfather, caregiver isn't always happening, and they're learning it on these different TikTok and other social channels, of which those people creating content need to be able to give out accurate information and information on food safety, but they have to be educated themselves also.
Dr. Lambertini, do you have anything you'd like to share about just the one takeaway that you hope people take away from the webinar? I think you're on mute still.
There we go. Yes, as an engineer that is now interfacing with a wider array of professionals, I would say consumer power. Invite consumers, and as consumer, demand better information about your food and seek information so you can avoid the fads and go to what is important. So any program, as you've heard from others, that leverage that and really put the good information and the good invitation to express demand are very important.
Thank you. Yeah, food is, so personal. Your remarks are reminding me of how just it's ingrained in our cultures and in our behaviors and our families. And it's just really challenging to get that information across and empower folks. Another question I would have, let's see here. And maybe this is obvious, I guess, but what do you think can be done to inspire more people to embrace food safety and nutrition together? So really, where should maybe this information be showing up? How can we inspire more folks to do this? I'll start with you, Raeanne.
How do we inspire people to do this? Well,
Yeah.
I think maybe, even though I showed the example of just telling them what to do, I think sometimes explaining the why could be very helpful, because once people really understand why they want to do this, I think they could feel more ownership and really have more understanding to actually implement and see the importance of food safety education. So I don't know if that would really inspire people, but I think I like to know why versus someone just telling me.
It's a great point. Elisabetta?
Fully agree. And also I would add to leverage habit formation methods, and now we have more science of what they are, to make it a default, right? To make it easy for people to decide and to do the healthy thing. And it's really, there's so many entry points that once we understand what aspect is more interesting for a certain audience, we can start there and then add the other component.
Thank you. Carrie, did you have any thoughts you'd want to echo or add?
Yeah, I think when I'm teaching groups one-on-one, the discussion of the relevance to them. So even bringing it down to, have you ever experienced a 24-hour bug, and try to bring it to their attention that that's typically has to do with a foodborne illness, and also talk about the long-term impact or even short-term impact that it could have on their family, on their home economics of losing work and being out. I've had experience with 2 foodborne illnesses at least that were pretty severe. So I like to pull from that story to kind of educate so that they see the relevance, that it's not just someone else would get sick, that they themselves probably have had a foodborne illness.
Yeah, that's a great point, that often people minimize it as just something they ate. And, it can be more complex. And especially if you're working with vulnerable populations or malnourished populations, or specific dietary needs, the risk is higher. So that's a great point. I'm going to move to the question box here. So let's see. One person asked, what is considered the best way to get thermometers into consumers' hands? I've tried giving them out as door prizes, but would pick up at least one after the program. I will just offer that the USDA, FSES, so Food Safety Education Service, they have a store where you can request food thermometers, I think, through there if you're doing any direct programming. But I would love to hear from each of you, that conversation around food thermometer use. What has that looked like for you? And do you have any tricks for encouraging folks to use them? We could start with Elisabetta. I'll start with you.
This is an interesting question, because looking at some low resource contexts, right, the thermometer may or may not be the right tool. I think, it would need to be a technology that is appropriate for the context. So in some of the situations where I'm working on currently, maybe it's not ready, and I don't want to discourage going there, but it would need to be in a bundle of approach that, yes, explains how to use it, but not only that, it really creates a demand around this tool that is valued. And I think, again, as good is using recipes and could be using the pride and cooking something well to promote that. In more American audiences, I don't know, I'm thinking as a consumer, not as an expert here, making it like a nice fancy tool could work, right? It's not just a tool that, well, we have to use because someone tell us that it's the right thing to do, but it's an object that we enjoy and show our mastery, right? Like the fancy grill tools that that some people like to have.
Mhm.
So that
Raeanne,
just,
that reminds me of your approach with, I like to give these as gifts. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one because there's always everything in theory, nutrition
Yeah.
in theory, and then how does it actually translate at home? And that's the same with food safety. There's food safety, and then there's the reality. Both, as Elisabetta, you say, what part of the country are we talking? What part of the world we're talking? So that's why it kind of goes back to when you're working with somebody, it's really understanding whether you're writing or teaching or creating video content, who's your audience? And then you can speak to them in a way that really addresses their needs and really makes that message real in their life. So
Mhm.
if it's a higher end audience, you can talk about how you can get this perfect, cooked lamb or the perfect turkey for Thanksgiving. But maybe if you're in another audience, you can talk about, even though, it is temperature and time, but really having them look and understand, what does a cooked piece of meat look like, the importance of a thermometer, how you can maybe give them out free at the end. I mean, it's a really tough one because I think that if you were to even pull certain age groups, I really question how many young people actually own a thermometer. I don't know that from doing it myself, but that's a tough one.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think in theory, I mean, just as an aside, I think in theory, I look at recipes and I see that it will even instruct with like cubed chicken to take the internal temperature of a piece of cubed chicken. And, I'll be honest, it's not a practice I follow. And it's something that I just know when it's done. And I think a lot of people who are chefs just know when their chicken is done. But I mean, this is really tough because then I think my kids know how to cook, but have I ever taught them to use a thermometer on a cube of chicken in the stir fry? The answer is no, but I definitely have with other things in terms of, a whole piece of meat, like a roasted chicken or a turkey. So, I think there's just different ways that you can approach this, including, the food prep, the food storage. It's not just about the temperature.
Yeah, no, exactly. It takes all core four. Carrie, I know you guys are you engage a lot with the community. And just briefly, if there's any experiences you want to share around that.
Yeah, we have not given out free thermometers, but what we did create years ago when I first joined was the food safety magnet for internal cooking temperatures, just as giveaways, so that people would have that on their kitchen refrigerator instead of actually purchasing them. We created it ourselves in-house. So that's the most that we've done other than just the education. But this specific presentation is bringing me back to a desire that I wanted to do last year, but going forward this year is just doing how-to videos and the how to use a cooking thermometer, and just like the basics I think is necessary to have in our database so we can share it with consumers in different platforms.
Yeah. Fundamentals. Well, thank you all. I think just in the interest of time, because we're unbelievably already at 2:10, but we'll move on from the Q&A and do some wrap up here. We really appreciate all three of you providing your expertise and thought leadership today. If we can move to the next slide, please. Oh my goodness, yes. So we have speaking of safe temps. We're opening, the partnership is running a spring cleaning sale, if you will. So you can order, we have select magnets left, just a select few. So if you'd like to order any of those for your outreach efforts, please visit this URL. The window will close at March 17th. It's just a limited thing. We're cleaning house, organizing, spring cleaning. Next slide, please. We'd like to thank our contributing partners. Thank you, Big Y, and our other partners for making this work possible and these resources free to access. Next slide. And then, yeah, please stay involved. Follow us on our social media. Please follow our presenters on their social as well. You will get some follow-up information about where you can find them and contact them, and it'll be in these slides. If you'd like to receive more information from us, please sign up to receive our bi-weekly e-newsletter. We have Cooking Times, which is all safe recipes, really great resources for you. Next slide. And just a final reminder, we will follow up with your CEU information. NCHEC is a special questionnaire that will go out in that follow-up email. So please take note of that. And next slide. And thank you. I really appreciate your support and sharing your expertise with us today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.